Welcome to another exciting and informative episode of the Entrepreneudist Podcast, the place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. And today is no different. We definitely have a great business owner in the building today. But before we bring them up, I do want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Shield Wolf Strongholds, a wealth growth and protection company. When it comes to life insurance, when it comes to retirement planning, when it comes to estate planning, when it comes to employee benefits, if your plan ain't Shield Wolf, your plan ain't strong. If you're a business owner that wants you and your employees to retire higher than you would have prior, make sure you visit www.shieldwolfstrong.com or call or text +1 904 822 4262. Now to our guests. Christain Brim, CPA, best-selling author and podcast host, brings a wealth of experience and a deeply personal mission to his work in helping business owners with their finances. With over 25 years of experience, his background in both personal and professional finance, as well as his own family's experience with bankruptcy, gives him a unique perspective and empathy for his clients. Christain Brim, welcome to the Entrepreneudist Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I know. Thank you for coming, man. You've been doing this for a long time, man. Over 2 decades, going on 3 decades. Is there nothing that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started?
Oh Lord, the question is, would I have listened to myself? I've often wondered, like, if I wrote a book back to myself, like even just some summary notes, and say, here's the things you need to not do or look out for. I don't know that I would have listened to myself even. I don't know. Yes, to answer your question, there's a lot.
Okay, so let's say perhaps your younger self would have listened. What would you have said? One thing at least.
I think that the first thing, because I have been asked this question, and this is the answer I would give my younger self, is beware the power of self-deception.
Beware the power of self-deception. It sounds like you're saying that you are your best friend, but also your greatest enemy.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I think that entrepreneurs all suffer with some level of delusion. I think it's part of being able to be a visionary, of being able to see the possible, to have the vision of what you want to create. That ability has a dark side to it, in that you can ignore reality, which, is sometimes very helpful when people are telling you, well, that's a stupid idea, you can't do it. Like, it's great to be able to tune those voices out. But if you are ignoring reality, that can be a dangerous place. And that's what I call self-deception. Like, you just tell yourself what you want to hear.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite quotes is, you can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
That's very true. That's very true. And in my case, it was, repeating some of the patterns of my family mindset, the mindset and belief around money that I had learned as a youth, was the opposite of a lot of people. A lot of people come up in a scarcity mindset, and so they struggle with that belief of, like, money is a fixed pie, and like you can't create wealth. I didn't have that problem. My family, we didn't talk about money. And it was really just something that you could always go make more. That was what I picked up. That's what I believed. And so as I had success in business, I didn't mind my own profit as well as I should. Not that we were ever not profitable, but we weren't nearly as profitable as we should have been. And I rationalized that and excused that behavior because I thought the answer was, we'll just go make more. But the reality is that you can't grow the top line without minding the bottom line. Like, it doesn't work that way. I'm just rambling at this point.
Oh no, you're saying something profound, because the grass is always greener. All right. I know a person that I listen to. What's his? Jim Rohn. Yes. Jim Rohn said his mentor told him, he said, I want you to go out and make $1 million. Mm-hmm. And he said, once you make that $1 million, I don't care what you do to it. You can give it all away. You can throw it against the wall. I want you to make that $1 million because of the man that you have to become to earn that $1 million. It sounds like you're saying you grew up in you grew up in an environment to where a lot of the people around you had that mindset of the person that you become to make that type of money, because that is an amazing way to think, at least outside looking in. Somebody that grew up in a scarcity type of environment to where I had to do a lot of personal development in order to establish the abundance way that I think now. But what you're saying is that it's not always as good as it looks growing up in an abundance way of thinking.
Well, I think what I've come to understand is that our beliefs around everything, but specifically around money, are just that. They're beliefs. They're not necessarily true. They might be true in some circumstances, and all of those beliefs have their blind spots or shortcomings, right? I think that I'm glad I was fortunate enough to start with not having a scarcity mindset, but it had its own problems. And what I try to teach entrepreneurs is that those beliefs that you have are just that, and that they're not reality, and that if the belief is not serving you, that you can set that belief aside and replace it with an alternate belief. Like, you don't have to be tied to this programming that you have.
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. One of my favorite author of mine, Vernon Howard, he wrote a book called Psychopithography. And the way he described it is everything that you believe, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's the way you talk, what you consider to be offensive, non-offensive, you've acquired these things. None of these things are things that just you were born with. You acquired these things just like you acquire clothes. And just like clothes, once you decide that these beliefs don't fit you, once you decide that these beliefs are no longer in style for the way you want to dress, it's okay to take those clothes off.
I couldn't agree more. I recently did an interview with Dr. Matthew Cutts, and he is a pioneer in psychology, specifically what he's defined as what's the word? Hold on a second. I've got it right here. Contextual intelligence. Mm-hmm. And he talks about how people think about the future, and they think about how the future, their external things would be different, right? But they don't think about how they will be different, right? And he says that if you're thinking about like all of these things are going to be different, like you're going to live here, you're going to have this family, you're going to have this money, you're going to have this acclaim, whatever, however you think about your future differently than it is now, if you don't think about how you are going to be different, that's just a fantasy, right? Because obviously you are going to have to be different in that future for those future things to be real. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Quantum physicists Albert Einstein. He says, and what I like about Albert Einstein is as everybody gets smarter and as we come up with ways to test his theories and confirm that they're true. As it seems like as society as a whole goes further, the more and more they're confirming the things that Albert Einstein says are true. But one of the things that he says that hasn't been proven yet, and it's very hard to believe, but he says that the past, the present, and the future are all happening simultaneously. Like that's one of his theories. And whether or not that's literally true, just like you just point out, I think it's at least metaphorically true. The person that we are today is based off of the memories that we're having of the person that we were. And that's shaping the person we are today. And based off of what we are today is shaping that person in the future.
Yeah, I think his quote was the passage of time is the appearance of passage of time is a persistent, what did he call it? Not persistent myth, but like a persistent illusion. Yeah. Like, yeah, yes. 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 Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. See, all of that. Now, one thing that I noticed in your introduction, that I get it, right? But a lot of people don't get it. A lot of people would say, how is this person going to be my accountant telling me that he went through bankruptcy? And I think a lot of people would consider, at least in that moment, a bankruptcy to be a failure, but failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a part of success. What's the reason you're so transparent about your personal bankruptcy?
Well, to be clear, that bankruptcy was my family's bankruptcy when I was a teenager.
Okay, gotcha.
I have not experienced bankruptcy, although I certainly, put myself in a situation where I could have declared bankruptcy. That's what I was saying. I ended up repeating some of the patterns that I had learned as a youth, but I think and I think that's a strange thing when you have financial success that you can still have bankruptcy, because I think people think that bankruptcy is the result of bad financial choices, which, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, I think sometimes bankruptcy can just be external forces that you don't have any control over, but you can always learn from those events. I think if you're an entrepreneur, you don't view failure as a personal thing. You have to look at it as data. You can't tie your own self-worth into your success or failure in business. That's a dangerous place to be, because then if the business fails, then you're a failure. Well, that's not true. It's just you made some bad decisions, or you made decisions with incomplete information. There were external forces that you couldn't control. And all of that is data for you to learn to not repeat that same situation, if you're willing to learn. If you're not willing to learn, then, it will, as I've learned from my experience, you keep having the same problem until you learn from it.
Mm-hmm. And you use the word delusional. Some people might use it interchangeable with creative. In your experience, what are some common financial challenges that these creative / delusional entrepreneurs often face, and how can they overcome them?
Well, I think the first is mindset and belief. I think mindset is closely tied to belief. So the way I had it explained to me that really brought clarity to it is your mind runs primarily on your subconscious. We like to think that we're rational beings and that we make these intelligent decisions. But the reality is that most of our behavior, which is our actions, our words, our reactions, are subconscious programs that are running. And until you take that subconscious routine, that could be a belief, that could be a habit, it could be a mindset, until you take that out of your subconscious and bring it into your conscience and analyze it, you can't change your actions, right? And the way that presents in my experience and my observation of others is you keep doing the same thing and not getting the result you want, right? And so it's at that point that you have to start asking the question about, like, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I saying this? And that requires a certain level of reflective work that a lot of people aren't comfortable with. Like they just avoid that. But I think until you actually unpack that, and usually that involves working with someone else. It might be a coach, it might be a mentor, it might be a therapist. I don't know, but you usually need help unpacking that to examine, okay, this is why I feel this way. This is why I say this thing. This is why I do this thing. You're never really going to grow as an entrepreneur and be in control to the extent that you can be in control of what's going on. You're just running on this program that you're not even aware that's running.
Oh yeah, the subconscious is very powerful. I
Yes.
remember, I know hypnosis. I remember one time I was, I didn't realize I was doing it, and I don't even remember what triggered me to notice it, but I would clench down on my teeth like all day. I didn't realize it, and I don't even realize what triggered me. But once I realized that it triggered me, I looked up some hypnosis on YouTube. And that's when I knew that hypnosis was real, because what happened was it had me relaxing, and then it started giving me different suggestions and affirmations, and without me even trying, like my mouth, the muscles relaxed in my face, and I was grinning from ear to ear, and the smile was not it wasn't elicited by my forward mind, but it had to be elicited by my subconscious mind. What was your moment of knowing that the subconscious was the actual driver?
I think it was a culmination of a lot of things. I think the first time I was exposed to it is when I went through a year-long course to be certified as a master advisor. And that's just a made-up title, but it was the process included being able to separate yourself from your feelings, which was very novel for me. And the gentleman that ran this program, Rick Solomon was his name, and he was an accountant by trade, but this program he developed for accountants to be certified master advisors was based upon his own learning and experience. But he had us visualize our feeling, whatever that feeling was. Usually it was a negative feeling, right? As a balloon that you were holding in front of yourself, so that there was that separation. Like, I am not my feeling, right? Because for me, I feel a lot. I'm a highly emotional feeling person. And I often felt like my feelings were out of control, or like I just was my feelings. But being able to visualize that helped. And then he was like, okay, just release the balloon and then watch it go up. And then he said, when that feeling comes back, you just repeat it. Now, that was the first time I was exposed to that concept. And it was an incomplete tool for me because I was very emotional. I had trouble with that, but I had trouble with that exercise, like in the moment, being overwhelmed with feelings, being able to visualize something. So that was the beginning of it. It was a lot of work with my business coach. It was a lot of work individually by myself. I think it wasn't, it wasn't one point that I can put my finger on and say it was that point that I had full understanding of it. I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh no! What it did was, because yes, that same author, or Vernon Howard, he says whenever you referring to something negative about yourself, seemingly negative, that's your false self. You don't want to accept that as your actual self. And it sounds like what the practice that you were doing, the exercise that you were doing, was essentially removing that emotion and putting that negative, seemingly negative emotion in a balloon, separating it from you as a person, which is subconsciously what you need to do in order to move forward. How do you take all of those things that you've learned and apply it toward accounting and finances when you're working with people?
Well, the company that I own, I don't work with clients on the regular. I have a team that does that. What I focus on is one-on-one coaching with business owners to help them gain that clarity of what the actual reality is, and show them a potential path forward out of their problem. What I normally work with entrepreneurs that have had some level of a success, so like not newbies, but people that have had success, but they've reached some roadblock. They've reached some point where what was working for me is not working anymore. And that symptom usually looks like I'm burned out on the business. I don't like what I'm doing anymore. I'm not seeing the results in the business that I want, or, I'm just working too hard without getting the results that I used to. So that's what I bring the financial lens to use as a diagnostic tool, because, numbers finance and accounting is more akin to a language, and it's the language of business. And, if you understand accounting and finance, you can look at the numbers and they tell a story about your business. And that story is grounded in a reality that your visionary mind sometimes ignores, chooses not to see. And so when a business owner says, well, this is what I want, this is my plan, this is what I think the problems are, and we lay that financial overlay on there, that tool, I can quickly see where the reality doesn't line up with what they think it is. And that's a starting point to have that conversation around, like, okay, why do you think this is the case when I can tell that the reality is not that case?
And I noticed when I was preparing for our conversation today that you distinguish creative business owners. In your mind, are not all business owners creative business owners? And if that's the case, what is your definition of a creative business owner?
Yeah. My company, Core Group, they work exclusively with creative industries. That's traditionally certain verticals, but you raise a very good point, because I believe that all entrepreneurs are creatives, whether they realize it or self-identify it as not or not. I was in a hot seat at a live event with Perry Marshall, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And in that, he said, well, Christian, you're an artist. And I actually took kind of umbrage with that. I'm like, no, I'm not an artist. An artist to me is someone wears a beret and has a palette and a paintbrush, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not me. But as he described it, he said that entrepreneurs fall into two camps. I have since modified that to say it's a continuum. It's not either or. It's a scale between the two. And on one end, you have what he calls founders, and they are strictly driven by the opportunity that's in front of them. So they see a problem, they see a way to fix it and make money at it, and that is their motivation. The artist on the other end, which I call the creative, is one that is driven by purpose and by passion. And so they will see opportunities as far as like problems to solve and solutions to make money at, and they will say no thank you because they don't have any interest in it. It does not light their fire. It's not something that they're impassioned about. And so when you define it that way, I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I still don't like the term artist, but yeah, I'll choose creative and I'll pick that moniker up. But when you describe it to most entrepreneurs, they immediately say, well, yeah, I'm this place on that continuum. I'm definitely, and I think there are more people that are passion motivated on that end of the scale than there are the true builders that are just like out there solving problems to make money.
Man. So all right. So your team works with a lot of people. And then of course, it seems like your team is working with people in their business and you are working with people on their business. Is that a fair description? Yes,
I would say that. I think there's an element of that in what Core Group does at the relationship manager level, where they have these conversations on a quarterly basis with the clients about their business. But I think where I'm much more focused on the entrepreneur themselves rather than the business, because I've realized through my own experience that your business will grow to the level that you're at. And that's what I had happen to me. I mean, we got to a point where we just couldn't go any further. And I thought that the problems were external, like, the market, the industries, the service offerings, the mechanical things. But I came to realize that the limitation of the company's growth was my personal growth. And until I changed, the business was stuck.
So it takes that person realizing that they are their own limitation. And then so the business is affected by the personal and the personal is affected by the business. So how can a creative entrepreneur strike that balance? All right. I'm investing in my business, but I also want to save for personal financial goals. How can they strike a balance of doing that?
Well, I think the healthiest way to understand that is you as an individual are the same person in business and outside of the business. For me, that realization, the symptoms may not be the same in the business and outside of the business, right? So the problems that you might have in your marriage or with your kids or whatever with your neighbor have the same underlying cause that the problems in the business of you like, well, I can't hire the right people or I whatever. The problem that you bring to the table is the underlying problem, even though the symptoms may present very differently. And it's hard to see that without someone else being able to give you a mirror to look into. But specifically around money, I think the first thing that has to happen is you have to be intentional about why you have a business. You have to understand that you're creating a business to serve you, not the other way around. Because it's very easy to create a business that ends up being the tail that wags the dog, and it's sucking all of your time, energy, and sometimes money, right? That you need to have for your personal family. So I think it's about having intention of creating a business that serves you, that gives you what you want. I think that's the critical step that I missed and a lot of entrepreneurs miss. They just start a business and go.
Do you not have any books that you recommend?
Oh, got a lot of books. I would recommend the first book I read that really opened my eyes. So I went to university, studied accounting, graduated. And one of the first books I read was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he says some things in that book that really challenged some of my beliefs as a trained financial professional, that I really had to start asking the question, well, like, do I know what do I really know what I think I know, right? It started with his premise that, your house is your biggest asset. And he said, well, that's absolute bunk. He said, your house is a liability because you have to spend money on it. Even if you don't owe any money on it, you still have to pay insurance and you still have to pay taxes. It's always money going out. So that the house is not an asset. And I'm like, okay, that's something I hadn't thought about. So definitely, I think it's a primer to really start questioning what you think you know about money. Is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think as an entrepreneur, there are a lot of great books. I like anything by Patrick Lencioni. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Ideal Team Player. He's a great author who uses allegories to tell stories about business principles. That is just he's a really good communicator of ideas. I think Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, Traction by Gino Wickman are great books around the system of business, like creating a process and a system around your business to make it grow. The E-Myth by Gerber, quintessential book that I think all should read. I like all of the work by Dan Sullivan, Who Not How. I've got a laundry list of books. As a matter of fact, I have as a to-do for myself to curate a list. I was watching my wife read a book and it had a sticker on it that said Reese's Book Club. And I'm like, well, why don't I create a list of books that I recommend? Because, I'm at least as smart as Reese Witherspoon. At least popular, but so that's actually on my list. I'm going to curate a list of books that I think everybody should read.
Oh man, whenever you get that list together, please let us know so we can share it with our audience. Is there not a question that I did not ask you that I should have?
No, I think you've done an excellent job as a host.
I appreciate it.
Wait, no, there's one question you haven't answered. Mm-hmm. How did you come up with Entreprenudist? I'm intrigued.
Oh, okay, so when everything was going on with COVID and all of that stuff, I'm also a very highly read person. I like to read. I also know that history repeats itself, and if it doesn't repeat itself, it definitely rhymes, right?
Yes.
So I'm looking like I'll say, all right. So what was happening around that time when this was happening back in 1918, 1919, 1920, and come to find out, that's when radio came on the scene, right? So that's what got me to start my podcast. I like, all right, so let me repeat history and be one of the first podcast people, because back then it started with just shock jocks, and then as it went on, it became more meritorious and more sponsors and more stuff, just like what's happening with the podcast industry now. So that's why I started it. But then when I say, all right, well, I need to find a way to differentiate myself from everybody else. So I said, I want to talk to other entrepreneurs and business owners, but I want them to feel open and willing to share everything. I want them to bear all. So then that's when I said, all right, it's the Entreprenudist Podcast, a place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. So that's how I started it, and that's how I came up with the name.
I love that. There's a phrase some of my entrepreneur colleagues and I use, is opening the kimono. So it's as an entrepreneur, there is a tendency to put on this mask of success when underneath that mask, or underneath the surface, there's all of this turmoil going on, right? And that's the phrase we use to be vulnerable, of like, open the kimono and let us see what's really going on. This is totally inappropriate, but I'll share it.
Hey, Entreprenudist.
When I was a banker, this board member pulled me aside. I was a credit analyst, and I had presented to the board on this credit, and he pulled me aside and he said, a financial statement is like a bikini. And I said, okay, tell me more. He said, well, what it reveals is interesting, but what it conceals is vital.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's not really appropriate to say in mixed company, but I get it. Like, and that's really kind of the same thing with what you're doing and with the kimonos. Like, the success stories and all that, that's interesting. It is interesting. But opening the kimono, getting naked, being vulnerable is where the really vital part is in communicating between entrepreneurs. So I applaud you in your efforts, because these are the conversations that entrepreneurs need to have, and they're the ones that need to potentially learn from.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of opening the kimono, if you look up, you see my mascot, HD Bill, short for $100 bill. He has his trench coat wide open for all the world to see. The flasher, as they say.
Yes. Man, well, now he might be misinterpreted as a pervert. So I don't.
Hey, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? And if you're gonna do it, you might as well flop from left to right. Hey, who cares, right?
That's right.
But so I want to thank you so much for coming on the Entreprenudist Podcast. This has been another episode of the Entreprenudist Podcast, a place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. I am your host, Randolph Love III. And remember, if you're listening through audio, make sure you check the show notes. You'll see more information about Christain. You'll also see a link to watch the video, and you can see our handsome and immaculate ebony and ivory faces in your places. and you got to watch, because you didn't see the gestures that this professional just made on the screen. You gotta go to the show notes and watch it. This has been the Entrepreneurist Podcast. Until next time, don't play with it. Stay with it until you make pay with it. Christain and Randolph signing off.
Shalom.